is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
We're barely bowl eligible here on KC Sports Network. I'm Tucker Franklin, hanging out with Matt Lane. We are talking, well, we were supposed to be talking the ACC preview, but a little bit of news happened in college football that we have to talk about with our ACC preview. We're still going to preview the ACC as we are here, and we are breaking down and previewing each conference, each Power 5 conference, I should say. If we got another group of 5, it would be a whole mess, a whole nother mess we could do. But Matt Miller is not joining us on today's episode. Matty, it's just you and I. How are you doing?
Well, listen, Tucker, I'm going to have to ask for more money. We're going to have to figure out this revenue split. I'm going to need more to come my direction, or I'm going to, have to start looking around and taking my talents to a different podference.
Podference, that's good. Maybe podcasts do need conference. Maybe we can create the first and only podference in the history of podcasting. Listen,
we kind of have it already. I mean, look at the KCS and local college shows. You know what I mean?
You know what? I do think that networks are basically conferences. Think about that.
That's how they're getting paid now. That's how they're getting paid now, right? CBS is Big Ten, ESPN is SEC.
Oh, well, okay, yeah, that's how it goes that way. I was also thinking just like podcast networks in general that have multiple podcasts are conferences. But no, you made a really good point, because literally this is all for like TV, as Matty alluded to. This is all for like TV revenue stuff. And ding dong, the Pac-12 is dead, basically, as we found out on Friday. You know what, Matty, let's go ahead and run through just like a timeline of events. And let's start with yesterday, Thursday. It was absolute chaos. Let's start with Thursday, and I kind of want to get your reaction to like each event that happened. Because when Colorado, our last recording of a podcast, Colorado going to the Big 12 became official. And ever since then, there was that mystery team out there, right? Because they always said that it was going to be Colorado and another team going to the Big 12. There was a mystery team out there. UConn was rumored for a little bit. I think there were other ones, but the big one was Arizona. Arizona was big and rumored. Yep. They kind of sorted that out at the beginning of the week, and by Thursday, there was some real movement to Arizona becoming a member of the Big 12, as the Arizona and Arizona State's Board of Regents. They're the same Board of Regents, actually, which is an interesting in itself. But they met to discuss their future affiliation with athletics, and Arizona left the meeting expected to accept an invite to the Big 12. Arizona State was still mulling their future. Let's keep it there with those two schools, because something else happened on Thursday, but I want to get your thoughts on Arizona accepting an invitation to the Big 12.
We talked about it a little bit last week. I think like that made a lot of sense to be the partner for Colorado. It gives you, this natural, I don't even want to say rival, but another team off to the West Coast. It brings in a school that is good at basketball and football, something that matters to the Big 12. Yeah. And it kind of shoots your reach out, if you're the Big 12, out into the, not quite California, but close there in Arizona. There's a lot of like high school talent moving that direction. So like Arizona is a school that made a lot of sense to go to the Big 12. I think that was probably the least surprising move that we are going to talk about, because I think UConn was rumored, but Arizona, I think, always made a little bit more sense, seeming football matters more than basketball, and Arizona gets you both. The Arizona State part of it, again, kind of makes sense. I think Arizona and Arizona State, similar to UCLA and California, like the University of California, they're kind of like tied together. So like UCLA has to give California a certain percentage of the money they make from the Big Ten stuff already. So Arizona would have to do the same where Arizona State, if they pass. Arizona State following makes sense to me, is essentially all I'm trying to say out of it, because that money kind of has to split up between the two schools anyway. So I wasn't surprised to see their name starting to come up into it, even though I don't know if Arizona State provides a lot. It just, at this point in time, it might as well.
Location. That's what Arizona State provides. They provide Tempe is what it comes down to. And I'm sure that a lot of Big 12 members would love, a lot of Big 12 students, I should say, would love to, will love to travel to Tempe. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves, because I agree with you. I think Arizona does make sense. And when the first realignment was kind of rumored, if you remember about this time last year, when the Big 12 added UCF, Houston, and the 4 schools they have now, Cincinnati and BYU, they talked about adding the 4 corner schools, which, I mean, that's Arizona State, Arizona, Colorado, was it Utah as well? So that was the 4 they talked about adding. I don't know what the 4 corners are. You can correct me in the comment section. It's okay. But but anyway, uh, we also have at the same time the story coming out about, okay, what are Washington and Oregon going to do? Because it was rumored that Washington and Oregon were both in the talks of joining the Big Ten. I even talked about last week how Brutus the Buckeye posted a picture with the Oregon Duck about saying big things happening. Like that, it had been in the works. There had been talks about them getting up there, but on Thursday, Washington, their board of regents conducted a 95-minute meeting. That does not sound fun. Behind closed doors, but no action was taken. Again, I think that everyone had a good feeling what Washington and Oregon were going to do at this point, Maddie. What were your thoughts on Washington and Oregon's kind of decision making process leading up to their eventual decision?
It sounds like the Big Ten was a little bit more after Oregon, or that Oregon was a little bit more open about trying to see what options were available for them out there. And Washington, being a good rival for Oregon, also a pretty quality market and a good team, was
Yeah.
this like very likely to come along person, or like friend of Oregon that you want to be there. But it didn't seem like Washington was the person at the front of this kind of movement. And so that's why Thursday night they have this big, huge private meeting. And not that they just finally got invited, or they had no idea it was coming. It seemed to me like Oregon was kind of at the front of this, ready to go. You can't just really accept one team. That doesn't really work when you're after even teams. And then especially moving halfway across the country, you kind of want to bring somebody along with them. So it only made sense that if Oregon kind of started getting close to a deal, that Washington would go along with it. And it sounds like that started to come together Thursday night as Washington kind of met and started to figure this all out from their side of it.
It's very interesting too. Let's jump forward to, because like those meetings happened like late at night, especially Central Time and Eastern Time. Like those meetings happened late at night. Let's jump ahead to Friday morning. We're recording this podcast on Friday night. I think that should be noted because for clarity purposes, because literally anything can happen at any moment. But Friday
Well, I think
morning,
going to bed
go ahead.
Thursday, things are starting to the hype train was starting to die down a little bit for these teams leaving the Pac-12. I think as we
Yes.
went to bed Thursday night, it seemed like things were starting to come down. It sounded like the Pac-12 might be on the right path to saving itself. Like I feel like that's what the vibes were actually falling asleep Thursday night. Sorry. Now you can continue to the next morning.
That's my point, because on, I believe, Friday morning, it was reported incredibly early in the Central Time. I can't imagine how early it was in the in the West Coast time. That there was a very serious steam for the Pac-12 to stay together, for those teams to stay together, and Oregon and Washington not go to the Big Ten. I know that there was some apprehension with the Big Ten and some of the ADs with taking more West Coast teams. I think that was kind of a part of the deal, but then it also came down to Washington and Oregon as well. And mixing all of this too is the Pac-12 had a deal from Apple on the table for their media
A
rights.
weird deal. Yeah.
It wasn't a good deal at all, and it had to be like their only deal. I'm trying to look up the terms of it, but
it was their best
yes.
deal. It was incentive based. Essentially, it was
Okay.
the base was relatively low, but there was incentives to get people to sign up for some kind of like, I don't know if it was local or like essentially signing up for the Pac-12 network unrebranded, and then they were incentivized to like sell that, and then they could maybe match like roughly what the Big 12 got if they got a certain number. It was not a good sounding deal whatsoever. But that was the best they got.
Correct. A lot of people believe it was about $20 million annually per school. So, and that would be 10 million less than the Big 12, and that would be so much more less than the Big 10 and the SEC. So they were kind of in a very tough spot when it comes to that. But by Friday morning, as I was mentioning, they thought they were going to sign a deal. Like they thought that they were going to get that done, and then everyone was going to stay together, and that grant of rights was going to get signed. But it was very short lived, as Oregon and Washington kind of steered the ship. They accepted invites to the Big Ten. As I mentioned, some ADs were hesitant, but ultimately they were accepted unanimously into the Big Ten. And I'm very curious what your thoughts are of their fit in the Big Ten, Maddie.
Hey, the Big Ten finally got fun, right? Like that's what's happened with conference realignment. The Big Ten is now fun, and the four most fun schools are all on the West Coast as part of the Big Ten. I am not. I don't hide it. The Big Ten brand of football in college is not my favorite. My cup of tea. So now all of a sudden you're going to introduce the Washington fighting Penixes on the. Granted, he won't be there once they get there, but still Washington. Oregon with Dan Lanning. You're going to bring in Los Angeles, 2 schools. Like, you're adding a lot of flavor to the Big Ten that I don't know if the big people that like Big Ten football are ready for. It's like, I like it. I have no allegiance to any Big Ten team. I don't care about your rivalries that you want to protect. I just want to watch fun college football. And the Big Ten just got a lot more fun. I don't have to avoid all of those conferences games until Michigan plays Ohio State the final week. Like, it's all good now.
Right. I'm the memes have been actually top notch too. When it comes to like all this conference realignment stuff, I was just looking through if I could find there's a proposed like conference split between it. The West would be Washington, Oregon, UCLA, USC, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Northwestern. And the West is way more fun than what the East would be because it's obviously Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, Illinois, Purdue, Indiana, Rutgers, basically the same Big Ten East at this point. I guess they add. Who do they add? Purdue? I don't know. This isn't a Big Ten show. I think it's Purdue, but it's very close to the same conference, but just adding those to it. I do think it's really interesting, but as you mentioned, those are the most fun teams in the Big Ten now are going to be those West Coast teams. Also, that should not be overshadowed by like them joining the Big Ten. Utah and Arizona State applied for Big 12 membership. Like they said, all right, we see the writing on the wall. We got to get out of here. Good move for Utah, by the way. I think Utah could be really benefit from bringing the Big 12. That could be a fun Big 12 team. But Arizona State, again, like that's like Mizzou going to the SEC. I'm sorry. Arizona State going to the Big 12. Yeah, that's my comp. As a Mizzou fan, I said it.
I love Utah to the Big 12 because I'm just envisioning it 5 years from now. UCF is going to be going to Salt Lake to play the Utes with the Big 12 on the line. The winner gets to go to the championship game, and it's the UCF Knights having to go to Salt Lake.
They have to have the most messed up map, right? Like the Big 12 out of everybody, like West Virginia to Provo's BYU, but like, are they in Salt Lake City? Where's
Utah? BYU? Utah, Salt Lake City, yeah.
Okay, so Salt Lake City, I don't know where Provo is in Utah, but like Utah to West Virginia, that's a hike.
But then UCF's in there. You're going down. You're going down to Florida. True. Then you're shooting up to Cincinnati, which I guess like is in like what Southern Ohio or whatever. But still, like they're Kentucky. They're all over the place. It's just it's gonna be so funny to watch a Big 12 game that matters. I mean, I guess you could even say out to Arizona, right? It's just Rice Eccles Stadium there in Utah. Like it's a terrible place to play. Ask Pac-12 teams how happy they are to not have to go in there, especially in November when it's cold as heck up there because the way that stadium sits. I can just see it now. UCF in those little astronaut uniforms looking cool as hell, but just getting the break speed off of them in Salt Lake City in a game that matters. It's going to be hilarious.
Big 12 so funny. I kind of love the Big 12 just because it just seems so random. It is fun.
They bought in. Like this isn't a Big 12 show, but they've completely bought into just having fun. Like it's just the conference is fun, and they're paying them like that. They're like, okay, $30 million, which one ton of money, but they're like, that's not even coming close to competing with the SEC or the Big 10. They're like, here, have this amount of money. Have fun with it, and we are going to create the most chaotic brand of football we possibly can. We are going to add in BYU and UCF and Houston, but then we're going to throw in the Utah Utes on top of it, and we're going to bring in Coach Prime. Like, they just are having fun.
There's so many different brands of football, and that's what makes it so good. You talk about the Big Ten being a boring brand of football. The Big 12 right now does not. The Big 12 had the, like, no defense brand for a little bit. The Big 12 is just like, whatever you want to do now. It's just like they're the wild
It's a
card.
triple option. Just can they pull Army in? No, I think Army's moving
Ooh,
away from it. I think, or is
Army's
it
moved. It's
one of the
Navy
two?
now.
Yeah, because the rules don't allow you to chop block outside the tackle box, like the triple options die. But like, still, the Big 12
Right.
needs a triple option team just to round out the bingo card.
I think Georgia Tech finally moved away from it, sadly, but that'd be a good fit. But before we hit a break, Maddie, I do want to talk about this. Was from Matt Fortuna on Twitter. We talk
Atlanta.
about all of right. We talk about all of this, the money that's going around. This is what he tweeted out. Matt Fortuna source: Oregon and Washington's annual cut of the Big Ten's revenue distribution is expected to start at $30 million. By the way, $10 million more than the projected uh deal that Apple would have given them, and grow by $1 million each year through the length of the current deal. They will receive full shares upon the next TV deal in 2030. 30, that's not a real year. 2030 and 2031. They can borrow off future earnings. So basically, they're not getting a full revenue split from the Big Ten, but still getting more money than they would have in the Pac 12. Not a good look for the Pac 12. That's why the Pac 12's dead.
Yeah, I don't know the legalities of this. I do wonder if after a couple years this can be reworked or something, or if they just simply add enough teams, if they can redo the TV deal. Like, I don't know how any of that works. That seems to be a long time. And I don't know. Do you happen to know what the rest of the Big Ten teams are making? If you don't, it's okay. It's just I
No,
don't
I'll
know
look it up real quick if you want to stall.
I don't know what kind of handicap they're working at, but like, I mean, going what is it going to be 6 seasons, 7 seasons? Being
It's a
handicapped,
while. Yeah.
that's a pretty big deal if it's like a significant difference. So that's the one thing that jumps out to me. But still, like you said, that's more than they were going to make. It's growing each year, and then they're already in on the ground floor once they hit the next TV deal. So like, it makes sense. Like you don't want to be Oregon and Washington and be left sitting out after the corner schools already leave the Pac-12 for the Big 12, and then you're just kind of like completely stuck. So jumping out early, even for a little bit less money, makes sense.
It looks like, according to the Sports Business Journal, the article that I just found really quick, and I'm skimming it. I think it said 50 million. Sorry,
Whew.
is what the schools make, which that's a lot. They just signed a new deal too,
Yeah,
so that also plays into it.
it
And
does.
worth more than 8 billion. Holy cow!
So we're getting far off topic of things that we are that you and I that should be trusted to talk about. But this is what the Big 12 did good with their TV deal. Every new team that comes in makes the same as everybody else. They get the equal sharing. So like that's where the Big 12 is a good thing. Like here, Oregon and Washington are playing at a stark disadvantage in terms of the revenue they're bringing in from the rest of the Big 10 for now. I mean, it says they can borrow from the future earnings and whatnot. So like they'll be fine overall. I just wonder if they really will have to go 7 years of playing at this kind of deficit. I mean, it's only growing $1 million per year. Like they're still going to end it making $10 million less. I don't know.
It is interesting. I'm just looking at some of the other deals that kind of go through college football. The SEC's has the SEC network and ESPN, right? That's a 10-year deal with ESPN. That's a total of 7.1 billion, and the average value is 710 million over the span of the next 10 years for each school. So I mean, like, the money's insane. There's more money than I could ever think about in my whole entire life. But yeah,
Go
so
Mizzou.
Maddie, right, go Mizzou, baby. Mizzou made. So let's take a break, and then when we get back, let's talk about like where the Pac-12 goes from here and the teams that kind of got left behind.
6
We'll
feet
be right
under.
back.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
We're back on Barely Bowl eligible here on KCSN. I'm hanging out with Matt Lane. I'm Tucker Franklin. We're talking conference realignment before we get into the ACC preview. But Maddie, there are some teams that are just been left in the dust. So let's give a quick recap. Like as it stands right now, Arizona and Colorado, I believe, have been confirmed to the Big 12. I don't know if Arizona's officially been confirmed. I think they were actually voted in.
They accepted at the very least. So like that's
yes.
pretty much a done deal.
Okay. Colorado for sure has been accepted as well. Oregon and Washington are to the Big 10. Utah and Arizona State have applied for Big 12 membership. As we're recording this podcast, I believe the Big 12 is having a meeting as we're recording, and they do expect to be accepted. So the Pac-12 is now left with the mighty Cal Bears, the Cal Golden Bears, the Stanford Cardinal, Washington State, and Oregon State. The Pac-12 is now the Pac-4. Eddie, where do they go from here?
Gone. I don't think there's anything you can do. So you could maybe try to reach down and pull 4. Is 8 teams enough? Is 8
I don't think it's enough.
teams?
I don't think 8's enough now. I really don't. I think they have to have
like,
at least.
Yeah, and so I think they just have to dissolve, and they just have to go to the Mountain West, make the Mountain West great again. And the thing is, I think Cal might just be done with football. I know they've come out and haven't said that, but like football doesn't matter to that school whatsoever.
No.
They care about their Olympic sports and the money that football brings in, but now football is clearly not going to bring them any money. Did they want to keep jumping through all these conference hoops? That doesn't sound like something that Cal wants to do. Stanford doesn't want to either, but they at least started making some changes this year to be somewhat competitive in football. I think Stanford could survive as an independent if they didn't want to join a lower conference. I think that there might be enough there for them to survive as an independent if they wanted to go that route. And I mean, Washington State and Oregon State, just go to the Mountain West. I mean, just do it.
Yeah, they could run the Mountain West. What, Maddie? What do you think the chances are? I tweeted this. That's true. I shouldn't count out Boise or those Fresno State Bulldogs. What are your thoughts on maybe those two teams, those like conferences merging, making like a Mountain 12 or a Pac West type of conference with those other teams and like coming
That's what they
together?
should do.
Yeah.
No, they should do that. The issue is you would want to keep the Pac-12 name because it just carries a lot of value, even if it's all new teams. But I don't know if you can have 6 to 8 new non-Pac-12 teams and only have 4 Pac-12 teams. Of those 4, them being California, Stanford, Oregon State, and Washington State, and then claim you're the Pac-12, right? Like, I think that was my question of if 8 teams was enough, you could maybe call yourself the Pac-12 because you at least had half the returning members. If you're adding 68 other teams, I don't know. I don't think you can get by with it. I think I'm going to call shenanigans.
You can no longer call yourself like. I don't think the Pac-12 has any leg to stand on if they get 8 more teams. Like you can't call yourself the Pac-12 anymore, right?
I agree.
You can't have that name. You have to take the other name at that point. But maybe it is just like the Mountain West becomes that next Power 5 conference.
Yeah, well, so I guess this all kind of curtails into the ACC, which we're getting to next.
Yeah.
There's no longer power. There's no 5 power conferences. Let's call it straight up. I don't even know. Is there 4 or is it just, or are we well on our way to 2? Because I like the Big 12. I said it's a lot of fun football. They're not competing with the SEC and the Big 10 going forward. We just talked about the money. The Big 12's brand new deal is $20 million less per team than what the Big 10 got. And even more than that less than what the SEC got. So it's a big 2 followed by another 2. Is the Mountain West really going to be competitive with what's going to be left of the ACC in a couple of years potentially, or what the Big 12 has? So like, it's just, I don't even know where we go. I think you just Mountain West is now the best group of 5 conference. Oh, they're battling it out with, no, the American lost everybody. So yeah,
American did lose everybody.
The best group of 5.
The American teams went to the Big 12 is what happened. And I think the American actually took on a bunch of Conference USA teams because I think North Texas is now in the American. UTSA might be up in the American. The Blazers, UAB is up in, I think, the American. Look at me pulling all this stuff out of here. That is incredibly
James
interesting.
Madison hanging out in there too now? Like,
James Madison's not allowed to like compete in anything because they're too good.
But they're better than everybody.
It's so insane. They get up from FCS and they say, yeah, you can't actually go to a bowl game because you're still on like probation, even though you won. What was it? They won 8 games last year.
They were good. They won the conference. No, Yeah, they were 8-3.
did.
They were 8-3
Yeah.
and they won the conference essentially. Yeah. Oh, okay. I guess they won the one side or whatever. And so
Mm.
yeah, but they couldn't compete because they said, nope, you're still under probation. Your school funds your football team with too much money for this conference. You're not allowed. Not really. That's not why, but they do give it a
No.
lot of money.
It's 2-year probation too. Like they can't do anything this year either. Like if they win the conference, they're not going to the college football playoff. Sorry.
Oh man, it's chaos, man. It's chaos everywhere. And then, like I said,
Yeah.
how many years until the ACC is doing the same song and dance as the Big 12 as the Pac-12? It's coming up, right? They're on they're on the worst TV deal right now. They are on by far the worst deal, and they're locked
Oh my
in.
gosh.
And they're locked in. Florida State's openly talking about like, hey, like we're going to start looking at overseas funding companies to see if they'll buy us out so that we can look somewhere else. And like Clemson and Florida State are voting for players share or like revenue sharing with players. They're like the only two teams in the ACC, which is weird because the ACC is not making that much money comparatively. So are they already expecting to get out? Like the ACC is coming. Like the ACC is going to take note of what's happening in the Pac-12 right now.
Yeah.
Get out while you can.
That's a 20-year deal. Like that deal does not expire until 2036. That's
so
insane. Listen, shout out to the ESPN lawyers for finessing that deal. Like honestly, you can't even be mad at ESPN at that point because that is an absolute finesse job of a deal. So I guess that leads us perfectly into the ACC, right? Because I'm with you. I think it's really going to be like, I think the ACC is the next to go, right? Because I think the Big 12 has kind of been like, okay, we'll be the best of the rest conference, basically. And I think that's kind of
the Big 12. I can't wait for the Big 12 just to sit back and just hold off, let the Big 10 and the SEC start poaching the top teams from the ACC, and they just start coming in and sniping the fun middle teams like the Louisvilles or Wake Forest. Pitt.
Right.
They just snipe out all these middle ground teams just to make more chaos in the Big 12. I'm so excited for that now.
The Conference of Chaos. Listen, I'm with that. But no, it's let's get into the ACC. The preseason poll, not a shock that Clemson was picked. Clemson, I feel like you're just gonna pick them. This is what you feel like. Number 2 is Florida State. Number 3, North Carolina. That is a clear tier of teams right there. 4, NC State. 5, Miami. Tied for 6, Duke and Pitt. With 8th, Louisville. 9th, Wake Forest. The Sam Hartman era in Wake Forest is over, so it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. And Maddie, you and I had a conversation about this. The gap between Wake Forest and Syracuse is pretty large at 10, but then the gap between Syracuse and Virginia Tech at 11 is also pretty big. It's about like the same. I'm doing the quick math. It's about, well, it's a little bit more from Wake Forest side, but there's a Syracuse is firmly 10th. Virginia Tech is 11th. Georgia Tech is 12th. Boston College 13th, and Virginia 14th. Any surprises on that poll, Maddie?
No, I don't think so. I think it might be surprising to some people to see Syracuse so low after a pretty good year last year, but they lost a fair bit of talent. And I mean, Syracuse is nothing if not inconsistent from time to time as a football team. So them checking in there isn't a surprise, I guess, but it is funny to see the numbers because, yeah, they essentially have like the biggest and then like the third biggest gap is around them on both sides. Like they're very much isolated on their own intent. And I mean, like so since Matt Miller's not here with us today, we're going to do this show a little differently in case we haven't found that out as we've chuckled through conference realignment for half an hour now. But like we were kind of grouping some teams together and Syracuse is just left sitting out and a group on its own because it didn't really fit with anybody else. And it kind of doesn't fit with, like it's by itself here in this too. So I guess it's good for them that they're on their own. Give me one nice thing about Syracuse for this upcoming season, Tuck.
I think that one good thing you could say about them is that you like don't know, like I think there's like potential, like you don't know what you have there. Syracuse is an
Garrett Schrader's been there for 13 years, so I know what he's got. That's
true, but I mean they lose basically their offense and Sean Tucker.
Tweet game's going down.
Tweet game. Is he on an NFL roster, by the way? Did he get picked up by somebody?
He had the medical issue, so I can't remember now.
That's right.
He had the medical stuff going on. He had to do his own pro day. Real quick,
Yes.
Aronde Gadsden, giant wide receiver for Syracuse. I think they actually list him as a tight end so that he can set records legitimately. I think they list him as a tight end, but he just plays wide receiver. But I think they have him play as a tight end so he can like look better at the records or whatever. He's a good player. He is an oversized wide receiver, undersized tight end, but he's a good player. So he's fun to watch. That's the nicest thing I got for them right now, I think.
I will say their offensive line's experience. They've got a lot of upperclassmen in that on that offensive line, and I think that Sean Tucker did have a decent amount of success at Syracuse last year, and probably a big part of that is the offensive line. I think that they've got a lot of guys back. They got looks like everybody except one. Well, one guy's a redshirt sophomore, and they have all junior. So they go, oh no, redshirt sophomore, junior, senior, redshirt senior, senior transfer, redshirt senior transfer. So like they've got some experience on that offensive line that could be good. Especially you talk about Garrett Schrader. He's gonna need some of that protection there with that offensive line. But yeah, you're right. Syracuse, as a guy who bet on Syracuse a whole lot last year, wildly inconsistent. You never knew which team you're gonna get, and it's always so fun to watch a game in the I don't think they call it the Carrier Dome anymore, but whatever it is now, it's a fun little game to watch.
Yeah,
it might be the
right,
RCA Dome.
Yeah, I think it's the RCA Dome now. All right, so this is what we're gonna do for the rest of this. I kind of tiered off some of these teams. I'm just gonna ask you questions for these groups and to see what you think. So we're gonna start. Let's start at the bottom. I'm gonna go reverse order this time. You already read the order. Let's start at the bottom. Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, Boston College, and then Virginia. Those are kind of the bottom four teams we assume here of the ACC. That's what the voting came out with. I kind of agree with that. Out of those four teams, which one do you think stands the best chance to kind of surprise everybody and maybe make a push to not necessarily compete for the ACC championship, but like to finish in the top half of these standings at the end of the year?
That's a good question. I know a lot of Boston College. I've seen a lot of buzz about Boston College, but I don't necessarily buy it per se. They're a team that I think is pretty interesting. The tech schools are also really what's the word? I do think that there's a lot there with the tech schools that are intriguing. But Boston College could be one that's like sneaky. I don't think they'll like make a bowl game or anything. Like I don't think any of these teams are making bowl games, right? I should clarify that. But maybe Boston College has the most ground to gain, right? That rather than the other schools. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, for Boston College, I think last year they had so many injuries to their offensive line that a lot of those guys are coming back now. So they do have an experienced offensive line. That team's always been competitive. They always kind of punch up a little bit from where they've been. So, like, I mean, I could buy in on them having a little bit of a bounce back year. But man, I don't know. The talent gap seems to be there. I think I'll take Virginia Tech to probably be a little bit better, just kind of return to what they may have been 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. Brent Pry's there now. He's had a little bit of success kind of as a coordinator and stuff, or as a defensive coordinator around college football. I think he's at Penn State for a little while. I forget where he was before that, but he's been around a little bit as a defensive coordinator. You come into the ACC, you can play good defense. There's plenty of teams that finish in the middle of this conference that just play good defense and run the football kind of well. Virginia Tech can maybe get back to that. They are in a talent-rich area for football players. I mean, the DC, Virginia area has a lot of good football players. Virginia Tech finds a way to get really good athletes consistently coming to that program. So maybe they just kind of hit a good stride this year. I don't think they have an overly tough schedule, and they can just pull off, an above 500 season within conference play.
They do have they got a trio of transfer wide receivers as well. Which can be really interesting in there. So that wide receiver room as well. So Virginia Tech is one of those teams that could be could be one. I like that. I like that pick a lot, Maddie. But before we get on to the next group, I gotta throw to our last break here, and then we'll be back talking more ACC.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
All right, we're back on Barely Bowl eligible here on KC Sports Network. Maddie, what is the next group of teams we're going to be talking about?
Okay, next let's go with NC State, Pittsburgh, and Wake Forest. These three, they're the same team every single year. They're a little bit better some years, they're a little bit worse others, but they're the same team. These teams have identities. NC State and Pitt, they're going to dominate you on the trenches. They're going to play physical, defensive-minded football, and they're going to make offensive teams hate their life, and they're going to win ugly. Wake Forest is kind of the opposite. They're going to run the slow mesh, they're going to air it out, and they're not going to play a lick of defense. But these teams are always what they are. They've had a lot of success in the ACC. Which one of these three teams is going to bounce back and has the best chance to compete for playing in the ACC championship? Is it NC State? Is it Pittsburgh? Is it Wake Forest?
Interesting. As I mentioned, kind of when we were talking about when we were just doing the ACC rundown, Wake Forest, they lose Sam Hartman, who had been there forever. I think he's basically been the identity of that team. They don't bring in a transfer quarterback right now. It looks like Mitch Griffs is going to be their starting quarterback. Pitt is a really interesting one because I think that Pitt always finds ways to hang around game, and I don't know if like Keaton Slovis was like the best quarterback for that offense. Truthfully,
he was not.
I don't know if he was a good quarterback. Full stop. Period. You look at, and Pitt brings in 3 transfer quarterbacks this year. They're stuck in kind of quarterback purgatory, trying to figure out who they're going to have. They bring in Phil Jerko. How do you say that guy's last name? Jerkovich. Okay, I was gonna say Jerkovich, but I was like, "There's no way that's how you say it." I should have just trusted my gut.
Also, fun for that, they also brought in Frank Signetti as their offensive coordinator. Was he there last year? I can't remember now. He might have been there last year too. But he was Jerkovich's offensive coordinator during his good season at Boston College 3 years ago now, before all the injuries. So there could be some similarity between quarterback, at least one of their transfer quarterbacks, and their offensive coordinator. I think Keaton Slovis, post elbow injury at USC, has been a terrible quarterback. So I do think their quarterback play will improve. They're going to cycle through some running back that's going to be competent. The offensive line is going to be mauling for the conference. The defense will be good. That's why they're my pick. I think it could be a salty premium because they just might get a slight boost to QB play. And if you give them, because again, quality, Kenny Pickett wasn't great. Yes, he had a great senior year there for them, but he wasn't a great college quarterback, but that team, when they had him, was really good. So I don't know. They're my answer. Sorry, you can get back to whoever you had now.
No, and that was kind of my thought process of all these teams offensively, while they have their own styles, seem somewhat the same as you were mentioning, but I think it's going to come down to the defensive side of the ball to what separates these teams. And I think it is probably Pitt when you start to look at how they are made up defensively. Wake Forest is such an interesting offense, though. I'm curious to how a new quarterback. Well, I guess they didn't bring in a transfer. Would I don't know if you can come into that offense right away. If you're a transfer, come into that offense and be okay, I can do this. That makes sense why they didn't probably bring in one. But we didn't really mention, North Carolina State either, which weird team because last year, sometimes I was man, that's a good football team, and then sometimes I was that's not actually a good football team, and I really don't know if they're going to be this year at all either.
I don't have a great read on them. I never do. Their defensive line is going to be good, and they're going to have a playmaker in the secondary somewhere, and that's every single year for them. And then offensively, the offensive line is going to be good. They're going to have some big ballers up there on the offensive line, and then it's a matter of what can their quarterback play. I know Devin Leary was hurt last year and didn't play particularly well for them. He's since transferred to Kentucky, if I remember correctly. So he's out. They brought in Brennan Armstrong. That's a familiar name for ACC fans. Is now in there. I don't have a ton of trust there. So that's why I'm a little lukewarm on NC State. Year in and year out, they probably have the best talent of these teams. They get the best athletes, the best star rating of guys coming out of high school. It's just, I don't know if I trust the quarterback play. And I just always struggle to get a great read on NC State. So that's kind of where I just kind of steer clear of them for the most part in terms of projecting or betting on them.
NC State has a tight end. He looks like he's a graduate. His name is Trent Penix. Is he related to the other one?
I have
off
no
topic,
idea.
but I was just looking at the roster and I saw that and I was I didn't know. By the way, as we're recording this podcast, sorry, I did tell you guys we were doing it on Friday night. Arizona State and Utah have officially left the Pac-12, and they are going to join the Big 12 in 2024.
Good.
That is now breaking news. By the time you listen to this podcast, you're already going to know that. But that's breaking news to us right now as we're recording this podcast. But
well, look at the Big 12. Be happy. Big 12 may have lost, their blue chip teams in Oklahoma and Texas, but they got a better one back in Utah.
Arizona State, and Utah. Utah's a good school. I don't. Caleb Williams hates to play Utah. I've said it last week. Caleb Williams,
everyone hates to play Utah.
It's his kryptonite.
Big 12 teams are not ready for the size
They're really
and the physicality of that Utah football team. There's going to be a big difference this year for like UCF and Houston and those teams stepping up into the Big 12, playing Big 12 athletes and players. There's going to be another thing coming when Utah shows up and Iowa State thinks they're just going to run over Utah's defensive line.
Does Utah become the Big 12 favorite immediately?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, that's what I was thinking. But
yeah, no, for sure. I don't even know if it's close. I mean, like, I don't know if it's close.
I don't think so either. I think it's Utah's conference to lose at this point. We're talking ahead. Cam Rising will probably come back. Who knows? He's probably got another year of eligibility somewhere. We can look around and find him one. Okay, Maddie. Sorry. Back on track to the ACC.
No, we're good.
We're almost done. What do we have? How many more?
We got two more groups. This next one, Miami, led by Mario Cristobal. Duke.
Yeah.
Oh God, I just completely blanked on Duke's head coach's name. Is that Mike Elko?
You got it.
Right?
Yes,
Mike Elko. And then Louisville has got Ryan Braum coming in. All new-ish coaches. Braum's obviously first year. The other guys are second year. Which one of these new head coaches, first or second year head coaches, is most likely to take their team to the ACC championship game this year? Duke was on the fence last year. They were so close, but with the super easy schedule gets a lot harder this year. Louisville has arguably the easiest schedule in all of Power 5 football this season. It's like, which one of these teams do we think is most likely to get close to that ACC championship game?
So what makes me a little weary about Louisville is the first year head coach type of deal, type of situation. Probably shouldn't get as worried about it as I do. I think I like Miami. When I start looking at kind of who they brought in, I mean, listen, they had Jake Garcia. He transfers obviously to Missouri, but he was a very highly recruited prospect, but he was just beat out by Tanner Van Dyke. So I like what they have at quarterback there. They bring in a redshirt a transfer tight end, and they bring in some reinforcements around the offensive line, which I think is going to be really important for them too. I like the way that Mario Cristobal plays football, like calls the game, coaches a football team. Like I like that. I like to watch Miami play football. So maybe that makes it a homer pick, but because I enjoy watching them play, but like I can see them make some noise.
I think year two with the improved recruiting is where you hopefully see the benefits. If you're Miami, they recycled both coordinators from last year because they were quite frankly bad. And so they got new guys. Like you hope that works. If it doesn't work this year, if Miami is not competing for the ACC championship, like they're not competing to be there, that's bad. And I don't think Mario Cristobal will be on the hot seat because he's like their guy. But like the talks will start swirling because that team has way too much talent. The defense should be really good this year. That offensive line, just like any Mario Cristobal offensive line, should be good. So like I think they're the correct answer. But since you went there, I'll go back to the Duke Blue Devils. I think Mike Elko had that team working pretty well. I think it's an older team now too. I think they have a lot of guys that came back for their senior season or a redshirt senior year. They have Riley Leonard as their quarterback. He's not the best quarterback in the ACC, but he's good. He's a quality college. Helmet scouting be damned. He reminds me of Daniel Jones while at Duke, but more so even like New York Giants Daniel Jones, because he uses his athleticism better, I think, than Daniel Jones did while at Duke because it wasn't the Cutcliffe system, so on and so forth. But like they just have a fun team. They have a fun offense. They have like 8 guys named like Jalen and Jordan that play like running back / wide receiver / tight end. It's like a bunch of guys that are just interchangeable. They don't have any real positions. They just kind of play all over the place, and it makes it kind of hard to figure out where guys line up. they play like people like we played Madden back in the day or NCAA football back in the day. They just have a bunch of offensive weapons playing everywhere. You get an older veteran team with a second-year head coach. Maybe they can make another run. Maybe they really are as good as what was their record last year. They had like 9 wins or something. Maybe they really are as good as that 9-win team that they were last year. So like, I'll ride with the Duke Blue Devils for one more year and see if the wheels fall off.
You mentioned them being an older team. 13 of their 22 projected starters are either grad transfers or seniors. So they do have some age on that team, which could be a benefit, especially when it comes down to trying to make a run for the ACC. But all right, Maddie, what's the last group that we got?
Final one: Clemson, Florida State, and North Carolina. Which one player from these 3 teams is going to mean the most for their team's success? It's like, let's say if we pick a team that if they win the ACC, which player is like the reason why? Which player kind of has that much pressure building on them?
So I don't know if this is I was gonna say this is a cop-out answer, but I don't know if it really is. I think for Florida State, it's Jordan Travis. Like I think that he has to be like very good. He has to be Jordan Travis the whole season for them to be like, if they're going to win, if Florida State is going to win the ACC championship, Jordan Travis has to perform at the level that we expect Jordan Travis to perform at, I think. And I don't think that that's too like safe of a pick, but like, if you think about Florida State, they kind of last year were like lived and died by how he was. And if he can just be a consistently good quarterback, like, we know he can, I think that Florida State can really get into contention for that title.
Yeah, they brought in who was it? Keon Coleman. He's a wide receiver transfer from Michigan State. Jaden Reed, his teammate last year, just went in the second round of the NFL draft. I think he was the first wide receiver taken in the second round of the NFL draft. I mean, Keon Coleman was a better wide receiver from Michigan State. He's probably going to be a better prospect too, and he just winds up on Florida State. Oh yeah, who already had Johnny Wilson, another quality wide receiver prospect, and like he's now their second. Johnny Wilson's now their second wide receiver. So like they have weapons. That defense brought back essentially everybody, if I'm not mistaken. Jared Verse came back. Fabian Lovett came back. I'm trying to think, did they lose anybody in the defensive secondary? I can't remember. Like they brought back most of their players. I think they lost the safety. They brought back most of their players on defense. Like, yeah, they should compete if Jordan Travis can stay healthy. I don't even know if it's about his play. It's his health. If he stays healthy, they're going to compete. And I think Clemson's the most likely to win the ACC. I think they're due for sure. a bounce back. But, I mean, listen, we want to talk about players with pressure on them. That's going to, their team's only going to go as far as they carry them. Look no further than Drake May with North Carolina. Like, everybody can say all they want about Caleb Williams. He's probably the number 1 pick. He's probably the best quarterback going in college football. But if there is not a single player in all of college football that has to do more for their team than Drake May has to do for the North Carolina Tar Heels, whom have one of the worst defenses in all of college football, who just lost like their top 3 receiving threats. Now, they did bring in 2 transfers that should, end up going pretty well for them right away, hit the ground running. But like, this team doesn't have anything without him. They're down there with Syracuse if they don't have Drake May. That's just like where the talent of this team lands them. And they have Drake May, and that's enough to get them a couple first place votes in the ACC. So like, if he comes out and has another Heisman level year, his production last year, Heisman level, it's right on par with Heisman winners of the recent years. He's the one guy that can push Caleb Williams, the best quarterback in the country, for that number 1 overall spot. If he does that, like, hey, they're right there. They have a chance in every single game, kind of like they did last year, just on the back of and arm of Drake May. So like, let's get that Heisman campaign rolling out. I want to see it. I want to see him come out and outplay Caleb Williams and steal that trophy.
That'd be pretty sick. You talk about North Carolina and just kind of who they have around them. There was only 2 players elected to the 2023 preseason All SEC or All ACC, football team from North Carolina. Obviously Drake May, but then Tez Walker as well, the wide receiver, received 51 votes at the wide receiver position.
It's crazy. But transfer from Kent State gets All ACC votes, just like showing up, just stepping up in competition. They're like, here you go.
Like, yeah, you'll probably find. But like, okay, you look at the defense too. Cedric Gray, North Carolina, as well, at linebacker. But like, you talk about Clemson, they had the most guys on this ACC preseason all ACC team.
Everyone.
Yeah, Jeremiah Trotter, a guy that people are going to be looking at. Tyler Davis. We're just looking on the defensive side of the ball. they've got some dudes, and Fintrell Cypress from Florida State too. He gets a little bit of a nod here at
Jeez.
this, but yeah, Clemson even. Will Shipley is going to be a big player for them at the running back. I don't know how much the running back is really going to play a role in their offense, but I mean, Will Shipley is a good one. He's a good running back.
They just need wide receivers to step up. They've had the same catch point wide receivers that just haven't been as good as T. Higgins or Justin Rossworth for them for, I mean, just injured Justin Ross included, just haven't been what they've always been. And so they have all these guys that are 6'2", 200+ pounds that can't separate. Like, it's all what they are. I think Antonio Williams is probably a guy that's due for a big year for him. I think he's a sophomore this year. He led the team in receiving yards last year as a freshman. It's kind of up to him to step up. Like, he's a guy that's got a little bit of a different, like, feel to him, and like maybe one of their other young guys can like step up and do a little bit of something with them. I don't know who it's going to be. Like, they need some offensive weapons to step up to give Cade Klubnik somewhere to throw the ball that's not to a 6'2", 210-pound wide receiver with corners draped all over him every single play.
Well, that's the thing too. You look at this all ACC team, and you see, so like as I mentioned, Will Shipley is on that team. And now these aren't everything, right? But like I know that like these are voted on by the media, and what do they know? But all of their they have the most players on this team. They're all on the defense, and that's kind of how it is right now for Clemson. Is they have Will Shipley and then the defense. Will Shipley was on there twice. He was the all-purpose guy, as well. But it's a very very interesting to see that. And you talk about the preseason player of the year. Drake May gets that award. He gets that nod. I don't think that's a surprise. Jordan Travis was about 22 votes behind him, with Will Shipley firmly behind Jordan Travis as well. So those were the top 3 vote getters for the ACC preseason player of the year. I don't know if there's any rub to that from this podcast. I think we pretty much agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And Jared Verse probably should have got. I think Jared Verse probably should have gotten votes over.
I think he got one vote.
I think he should have gotten votes over Will Shipley. I like Will Shipley, but like he should have gotten some votes in there. But I guess if you were going to vote for Florida State, you probably went to the quarterback and Jordan Travis. So like maybe that's where the split is.
I mean, Jared Verse got 136 votes for the defensive end, all at ACC. Yeah. So I mean, he might have maxed it out. Yeah, I think he got the most votes of anybody at any position. Yes, he did.
He should have.
So that makes sense. He doesn't actually get a vote for preseason player of the year, which is kind of interesting. Tyler Davis does get a vote. Riley Leonard, Jeremiah Trotter got 3, and Will Shipley got 17, as I mentioned. But that's the ACC. There it is.
For now.
For now. It is actually, I know that like the contractually, like they have to stay together because of that contract, but it is actually kind of insane that they've been able to stay together.
It's so expensive. It's so expensive to get out. If they can't get out, it's too expensive because of how long it goes. Like, realistically, for a college to pay their way out, it would be 4 more years before it's even affordable. And then here's the bigger issue. ESPN has the deal. ESPN's not going to let them get out of it just to go to the SEC that ESPN also owns. ESPN gets nothing out of that. Like, they're like, well, that does us no good. You're paying us just for us to put you back on there. Like, so they're in a weird spot. It's going to be hard for them to get out. They're kind of only, I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but like, I don't think they're long for the ACC. Those top teams, the Clemson or Florida State's going to start it. They're going to leave, and then teams will follow suit.
Miami to the SEC is going to absolutely slap. Miami and Florida State.
I'm here for Georgia. You said I'm here for Georgia Tech to the Big 12. Just the team that makes the least.
I think that's the one.
Just the least sense.
I think the Big 12 is trying to hit all 50 states. I think that's what they're trying to do.
Getting Atlanta's Georgia Tech coming to the Big 12. I really would love to see them score the Pittsburgh Panthers. I think that would be also hilarious.
That would be good. But then you'd have the backyard brawl back.
Oh, that's what everybody needs. And then the Big 12 will be at like 38 teams by then. So like every 4 years when Utah and Pittsburgh play, it's just going to be a bloodbath.
So this is how it is. This is how it is. It's 2 16-team conferences, right? The real teams plus Missouri, and you have them in the SEC and the Big 10, and then the Big 12 is just like the chaos.
They're
That's
just
how I think
32
is.
teams. The next best 32 teams.
I think we solved it. I think we solved conference realignment. Get us
Done.
on the phone. Brett Yormark
Put
needs
us
us
in charge.
advisors. It's done. And so is this podcast. Thank you, Maddie, for previewing the
Oh, man.
ACC with me on this wonderful Friday night. You're listening to this probably on Saturday, but we appreciate you
Unhinged.
guys listening to us. It's absolutely unhinged podcast of barely bowl eligible here on KCS. And I think we really lived up to the name today, Maddie. I think we lived up to the barely bowl eligible name.
Barely allowed on air after this one.
Pretty much. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end of the podcast. We cannot wait for the college football season to get here. Next week, we will be back. I think it's just going to be me and Matt Miller previewing the Big Ten. Maddie's dipping out. We said we're going to preview the Big Ten, and he said, I'm out of here.
We'll not be able to do that. 4 best teams before.
Right. That's why we got a little bit of Big Ten talk in today. But that's going to do it. We'll talk to you later.